Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. Today on Mid Masterpiece we are tackling One Piece Heroines and deciding on if it is indeed another success in the long history of One Piece or maybe it's a bit more of a miss. So without further ado, let's get into it. So, imagine you're me. It's a late Tuesday night. You're out on the town with your designer Crocs, ready to bedazzle the entire street. But wait, somebody snatches your man satchel. When you have to run after them, your designer shoes, they aren't as functional as you had once believed. And so you are left there on the sidewalk, both crying in regret and also crying for the functionality of your shoes. So when I found this amazingly relatable episode of One Piece Heroines, I just had to review it. So without further ado, we have the categories for you here today. We have the beginning category, which is out of 3 points. We have the characters category, which is broken up into the main character, which is out of 2 points, the side character, which is out of 2 points, and the antagonist, which is out of 2 points. We have the story section, which is out of 4 points. We have the new style section, out of 4 points. And we have the ending section, which is out of 3 points. Of course, that is a grand total of 20 points. And if you're wondering why I do it out of 20, because... And without further ado, let's glide on into the beginning category and talk about the fruit salad that makes anything great. A hook, a premise, and isn't interesting. So as for the hook, you have a pretty good one, right? Everybody loves the straw hats. That's why we're watching One Piece. And so to see them all kind of at the beginning, but it does the whole like One Piece fan letter thing where you don't quite get to see the illuminated faces of the straw hats. You only get to see the ones that matter, which are going to be Nami and Robin. And I guess Zeus, if you want to count him as like an honorary member. More of like an accessory to Nami at this point. Overall, I really enjoyed this. It's kind of fun to always get to see the straw hats. And I did enjoy the fact that just like the reason that Nami can't catch the guy who's stealing her stuff, which we'll get into a little bit later if that is actually believable or not, is just because the shoe broke her toenail. That was the reason he got away. I'm surprised that Zeus did not go after him, but it's fine. We don't need to talk about it. So overall, I do think that it has a wonderful hook. As for the premise, after a pair of shoes hurts Nami's feet and allows a pirate to steal some of her treasure, she decides to head back to the store to get a refund. While that is not possible, she does get an offer to make a new pair, but she has to be a runway model for Laban's show, which is kind of like the designer, right? Overall, I do think this is a good premise to have just because you can't do something too grandiose because it's most likely not going to be fully canon. You have to kind of understand what in the realm of a One Piece story can you actually get away with, and I do think this is an interesting way to do it because typically we don't really get these slice of life style moments for the Straw Hats to really live in, and so I overall really enjoyed kind of taking this different approach to One Piece's story. And is it interesting? Of course, because if nothing else, I like Nami and Robin. So overall, the beginning category gets a wonderful 3 out of 3. Now, as for the character section, that's going to be out of 6 points. We're going to start off with main character, which of course is Nami. That's who I'm choosing to be the main character of this. I think she is very classic Nami. I think it's funny how she's a Karen, of all things, to like the store attendant, which, I mean, it's not a complete surprise, but it is funny, admittedly, that she is being a Karen to this poor store employee. Well, I do think all of this is classic Nami and very fun. The story doesn't really add anything to her character, and this is just mostly because due to the runtime of it only being about 20 minutes, you really can't do a whole lot. I do wish there was a more spotlighting moment for her because after watching the entire thing, whereas I know One Piece fan letter I believe got a little bit longer of a runtime, but there are clear standout moments every single like mini story that was going on, and in Nami's case I didn't really feel like she had a real standout moment despite being kind of the main focus of this encapsulated story. So I was a little bit disappointed there, but overall I did really enjoy just having a story that focuses mainly on Nami rather than incorporating all of the different Straw Hats into it and kind of like gunking up the story with character congestion. So I really did enjoy that there. I do think she only gets a 1.5 out of 2, and that's just because I don't think she has any standout moments within this, and I also don't think people are going to come away from this episode revitalizing their love for Nami that they already had. I think this won't change anything about the character, it won't give them a clear standout moment, but overall, still a great showing. So as for the side characters section, Robin is a wonderful partner in crime and basically handles the majority of the heist. The entire operation of actually sneaking in is handled completely by Robin, and it's done so beautifully. I'm assuming these are all skills that she honed during her time with Crocodile. She kind of was like a head agent in a more assassin kind of organization, if you will, but overall I did really enjoy that. And I'm going to probably butcher her name, but Muicha? Something like that. Now, she is basically the story's crux and emotional heartbeat, and for a 20-minute episode, honestly, it's pretty fleshed out. I don't think we could have gotten much more with her struggles. I do think they are extremely relatable. I do think she is a good commentary on women specifically being taken seriously within like any type of field, and also being able to support themselves as an actual business owner. The fact that Lebon keeps saying over and over again that you couldn't survive without me. This business is my name. It's my designs. I make everything. Muicha was the one who was actually making the shoes, and she was pretty much the only reason that business was afloat, except for like the very high designer snobs liking Lebon's designs. So overall, I really did like Muicha. She does feel a bit cardboard cutouty just because she has to progress the plot in a believable way, and she also is more about the themes rather than her feeling like an actual character. I believe one of her most important lines in the series is, "In the real world, things usually don't go your way." This can be a commentary for a lot of things, and I think it's great. Something like women's inequality, or how people can often find characters in kind of media, specifically within like One Piece. You could say that the Straw Hats are somewhat unrelatable because they pursue their dreams freely, and while the real world is often very cruel, you can kind of feel like you can't relate fully to the characters, and they're off living their best lives while you're trapped here working like a 9-to-5. It does do a beautiful little commentary about that within this episode, of showing that yes, while that may be the case, you can still make your own future possible. You just have to take the leap to do it, which is represented in Muicha no longer being in business with Lebon and starting her own company at the end of the series, which you do get to see. So I do overall like that, because one of the best One Piece quotes out there, and I'll go ahead and get it, is, "If you don't take risks, you can't create a future." And I think that is a very beautiful encapsulation of Muicha's story as well. So overall, I do think the side characters, while a little bit cardboard cutouty for plot progression, are still really well-rounded overall, especially for a 20-minute episodic kind of slice of lifey story that we were going for there. And so I will give it the easy 1.5 out of 2 for that. I just think you need a little bit more personality in Muicha if you really want to get those perfect 2 out of 2 points. Now, as for the antagonist, Lebon, if for not him highlighting money changing people, when you in like a capitalistic society, the more money you make, you kind of lose sight of the original origin of your goal or your original passion. He's a commentary on that. He's also a commentary on women not being taken seriously within a workplace, or just also kind of not viewing them as much of a threat, as he, throughout the entire 20-minute episode, not once does he really make a commentary on the fact that the person he is inviting into this runway is Nami, a person whose title is Cat Burglar Nami, and is also a Straw Hat, so she's pretty dang famous. So either he's not doing his research, or he didn't think it would be an issue because she's a woman. And in both cases, you can just highlight how dumb this character actually is. So I do think he is completely worthless as an antagonist, other than just being really good at making the specific commentary that he's doing. Also, he doesn't really have a personality than kind of his like suave hair swooshes that he does like every 5 seconds for it. But I do think he is a wonderful accessory to Muicha's story, and showing specifically how her resolute dream had stayed the same, and she eventually had to take a risk to pursue it because her original partner, Lebon, had been corrupted by the money, and he didn't view her as a partner, he viewed her as an assistant. And so I think that it has great commentary there, specifically with how women are often undervalued within their specialties and also within their craft, especially when she had far more qualifications to be working in that position than Lebon ever did. I will give the antagonist a 1 out of 2, but I do think Lebon still overall succeeded in his mission. Now we're going to get on into the story section. I think it's great commentary on beauty and societal standards for women. I believe one of the opening lines is, "Oh, it's just a woman," when they think they can sneak out past Nami, which, for whatever you want to say on her being like it's basically agreed on that she's one of the weaker members of the Straw Hats. Not only does she have a staff that can manipulate the weather, she can electrocute you, and she also has Zeus. Which Zeus is like such an absurdly high power level thing, just in the fact of like, even if you didn't see the Elbaf clip, Zeus was Big Mom's homie. He was one of the most important homies for the whole cake art, for Big Mom entirely. And so for him, you to run into him, I would much rather run into Frankie. I would much rather run into Brooke. I would much rather run into Usopp or Chopper, for that matter, than run into Nami. I would be freaking terrified, because that means not only would I have to go against her and she would probably make me take out a loan with like 5 bajillion% interest, I would also have to get killed into the sun by Zeus. Just want to stick that point out there. I do honestly really think that that was a specific commentary towards women often not being viewed as a threat. And specifically the beauty standards, you can think about this with Muicha as she's talking about how Nami can get the things that she wants because she's beautiful, whereas Muicha does not believe that she actually is that beautiful, and so therefore she feels a little bit kind of forgotten from society because she will never be able to obtain the things that Nami will. I think the commentary on Laban with the looks over function kind of debate going on was very interesting. I think you can clearly tell that money has changed him, and that's very interesting, especially when you look at that little snippet of a backstory with him and Muicha. You can kind of see how far detached he's become from the original goal from when he started out. Another high point for the story is just that the slice of life storytelling is really interesting to be used, and something that I believe that One Piece should tap into a little bit more when trying to delve deeper into the Straw Hats specifically, because in the current One Piece formula, you're not really getting enough time to focus on each individual Straw Hat member as much as you did, because it's more about the world of One Piece rather than the characters at this moment, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I do think the kind of slice of life episodic storytelling could really help out certain Straw Hats, especially like Nami, who feel a little bit more left to the wayside than some of the other members like Zoro, Sanji, and Luffy, right? Who always get time in every arc because they're the strongest, they're going to be the most important for the Battle Shonen series. Now, I do think that the slice of life storytelling here and the climactic battle scene of Heroines is a little bit at odds, and I also think that it doesn't quite make sense just because Zeus is as strong of an asset to Nami as he is. And so to me, all she would have to do is one, either take her shoes off at the beginning of the fight and just use Zeus and just like electrocute everyone, or she could just immediately win by not moving and summoning Zeus to take everyone out, because these are just random cops. It's not like they're going to make much of a fight in the first place. And so I did find that a little bit weird. Like, if you threw in some like Navy people and maybe like a vice admiral or something, I would be like, oh, okay, maybe we have to like actually move around to fight these people. But it's just random security cops, so I don't think it's much of an issue. That being said, I do like that the thievery aspect that is never really focused on in the main One Piece storyline is kind of the backbone of this heroine story. And so I enjoyed how it's more about the heist of getting all of the jewels and the accessories back from Laban, who stole them, because basically he was running like a high-end designer brand, but he was using jewels that he stole from pirates by using pirates. This is more about stealing the jewels than beating the bad guy, although I do think like the fights are a little bit questionable at times. Now, other than the style and the fact that the One Piece Heroines is only like a one-off episode. Now, granted, I hope they make more because there are other stories. I do think it lacks any real memorability for the story itself, just because all I can really remember, even after just watching the episode maybe an hour ago, is Nami Robin, cool designs, heist, and I can remember basically the outline of the story. But there wasn't a highlight moment for me or like kind of an iconic moment. I did think the Starbucks cup was very funny that Robin has at the very beginning, but overall I do think that the story is not that great, even though the runtime is short, and I would give it some wiggle room there. But even taking that into account, the story is not there to support this one-off. Overall, I think a 2 out of 4 for the story section is a very fair rating. Now, we're going to get into the style category, and this is basically because world building wasn't really a focus of this, as it was only really 20 minutes, and the story was kind of more focused on the characters, so I believe that a style category is more interesting here rather than me just giving like a very rudimentary world building category. So as for style, I think it's interesting to take the battle shown of One Piece and put it into more of a slice of life. You have kind of more time for character moments, you have more time for dialogue, and I overall really enjoyed that. And also by dialogue, I don't just mean like two characters talking at each other while they're fighting, or doing that weird middle thing where like Luffy punches Katakuri for a bit, and then they sit and stand at each other and talk about feelings. Nah, that wasn't really what was going on here. You had a lot more time for interpersonal commentary within each character, and you also had a lot more time for specifically Nami to get some spotlight that she hasn't been getting in the main story. Same with Robin a little bit as well. Now, I also do think the main reason why you're going to be watching this, if not for the idea that it's just the heroines of One Piece, is going to be for the style. And I think the animation is very beautiful and very fun to look at compared to the main series, which, in my opinion, I think that the main series looks great. I love it a lot. It's one of my favorite art styles. But I've been watching that art style for about 1,000 episodes, and it's cool to see how it's evolved. But overall, at the core, it's very much still the same. And so I do kind of like seeing the characters drawn in a completely different style. It's the same as those Instagram posts, if you ever seen them, where like the guy will draw like Luffy and like 10 different manga artist styles. I think those are cool because you get to see different representations of the characters. And overall, I loved how Nami and Robin looked in this series. I thought they looked amazing. And honestly, in my opinion, I thought their outfits looked a lot more reasonable than they kind of do in the main series most of the time, especially the Elbaf one for Nami, which is a little, I think we can all agree it's a little bit questionable. And so overall, I really enjoyed that as well. I think it's great to get more of a focus on the female characters in One Piece. And I do hope we get more of these one-off episodes in the future, just because I know there's more in kind of the books that were made. And I also do just like this kind of moment to focus on the characters in One Piece that don't get as much spotlight, specifically the heroines, because typically it's going to be like a man versus man fight, except for the Big Mom, which Big Mom was the closest we got to like an antagonist actually changing that method up there. And specifically with focus on like the other Straw Hats and like other characters in One Piece, like I'm mentioning, I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of use this. I know it's your favorite part of the episode, don't even worry. Now, what I'm going to talk about here is I'm just going to kind of give an abbreviation for all the Straw Hats. So this is all your Straw Hats. And this is basically just going to kind of show you the importance of each one, right? So you obviously have Luffy here at the first. He's the most important one. You have Zoro and Sanji, which I would argue recently Zoro's kind of taken a backseat to Sanji in terms of importance, but you could also say that they're typically going to be either the second most important or the third most important. And then from here, you have the three most important characters on the Straw Hats, bar none. These other seven, it doesn't matter what you say, they are not as important as these three. That's just a fact of the nature, right? Ever since we got kind of the confirmation on Roger's crew, with it being Roger, Silvers Rayleigh, and Scopper Gabon, these three were always going to be way more important, especially in the latter half of One Piece, than the rest of the seven. What you also have here is typically in each arc, you'll have like maybe Nami will shoot up in priority for an arc, right? Like it's Whole Cake. And then specifically also in Whole Cake, you had more Brook moments. And then the rest of them will kind of be even. And this is a typical One Piece arc. So you have, essentially at any given point in time, you will have 5 people important. And specifically, you will also have 5 people more or less not as important to the story. Now, granted, some of them can shoot up in popularity, so you'll have something like Usopp, or maybe you'll even have Frankie be important as well. And he'll kind of join this section, and Usopp will as well. But typically, you're not going to have more than like 5 or 6 Straw Hats be ever important in a single arc. And typically, even the ones that are also kind of important for an arc are going to be really battling for the spotlight against Luffy, Zoro, Sanji. So to have these kind of one-off slice of life-y, or even if you try to use a different genre of anime as well, I think that could be very fascinating to try and put One Piece's characters into each different genre of anime storytelling and kind of storytelling in general. It's not just like an anime thing. I think that would be a very fascinating kind of character study to see how they behave in these different environments, because quite frankly, a lot of them don't get the spotlight that they need anymore. And specifically, something that was very shocking to me is that Frankie and freaking Egghead, literally his arc that he's been pining over for since the time skip, he's been pining for this arc. and he didn't get anything. He got that taxi service deal. And so I really enjoy kind of this idea of, let's make these side projects that are going to be good for the other One Piece characters. Not necessarily just the ones that are already important in the main storyline, but also highlighting specific characters like Nami, who I believe does not get as much spotlight as she deserves in the main story currently, especially. And so overall, I really did enjoy the One Piece Heroines for that kind of stylistic choice as well. And I will give it an easy 4 out of 4 for that category. Now we're going to glide on into the ending, as Nami and Robin relax on the sunny after having stolen both the fortune of Laban and his pride in that chandelier. They are happy to celebrate Mwicha starting her own brand and excited for many more adventures to come. So, I will give it a wonderful 3 out of 3 for the ending category, and that brings us to a grand total of 16 out of 20. So, what'd you think? Was I right on the money? Was I a little bit off? Would you have done anything differently? And what would be your choice for designer shoes? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye!